We are back on Taking Care of Business on Current Radio, News Talk, 1180, 1230 KGEO, 1410 KERI, 1000 KKIM in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and also 3 times on the Internet on knookmedia.com, serving Richmond, Oakland, and the San Francisco Bay Area.
We need to record that so you don't have to do it every time.
I don't mind doing it every time. So what do you think of Pedro Rios?
Well, I like Pedro. I always like Pedro. I think it's going to be a great race between he and Romeo.
Yeah, and it'll be an interesting race between the winner and Rudy.
Hopefully, Rudy and the winner of the Republican side will have a great race, too.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll have a debate here.
I love it.
Well, our next guest is a man who has become a friend of mine over the last couple of years. We have an issue that we share in common, that we both have a great heart for, and that's the POW MIA issue. And our guest, Rob West, has he's got a site. The POW MIA website on Facebook is one that he originated, and he's done an incredible job with it. And he just came out with a phenomenal book called The Thin Wall, a novel about a fictitious story about a POW in Europe. And we've got him on the phone. Rob, welcome to Taking Care of Business.
Thanks, Marty. Thanks, Clay. Appreciate this opportunity to be on your show, and appreciate your participation in the POW MIA issue as well.
You know, Rob, I wanted to thank you for something that I didn't realize until this morning. I noticed in the back there's an acknowledgement with my name on it. Thank you.
Well, certainly you were a big help and a source of inspiration for me during the time when I was writing the novel and the struggles that go with endless hours of putting something like this together.
Well, you did a great job, and I understand you're looking at writing another novel?
Yes, so I just finished in January The Thin Wall, which is published and available on Amazon and other book sites on the Internet. And I'm currently plotting out my second POW MIA novel. This one takes place in 1980 in Alaska, whereas the Thin Wall takes place in 1968 in Czechoslovakia.
Wow. How did you get involved in the POW movement?
Well, that's a good question. I had been writing short stories and screenplays for some time, and I wanted to write a novel. And, of course, I'd always been aware of the POW MA issue for some time. My father was in the Air Force, served 20 years, and I grew up on military bases. So when I sat down to write a book, I wasn't sure what I wanted to write about. And interestingly, at the time, I was feeling sort of dissatisfied with the direction of the country in general, how it was sort of creeping more and more towards socialistic values and policies and that sort of thing. And it got me thinking about the sacrifice veterans had made over the decades in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and all throughout the Cold War. And to me, I started to think about how they fought for our freedom, fought for democracy and for the Constitution, the things that I think that we all hold dear to our hearts that makes this country great. So I started thinking I wanted to write a book that somehow looked at political issues and at the same time examined veterans who I think are the real heroes of our country and the sacrifices they made. I started thinking about the Vietnam War. I was in second grade when Operation Homecoming took place in 1973.
God, does that make Clay and I feel old?
Well, I feel old as well. I remember sitting, we were at Hickam Air Force Base. I remember sitting with all the other school children watching the television, and was so moved by it. And even to be somebody who was, I don't know how old you are when you're second grade, 7 years old, 6 years old, something like that. Feeling moved by that, and those memories never left me. And from time to time, I'd always think about it. So I started thinking about my novel. I began to put the pieces in place that would possibly center around the Vietnam War. And I started to investigate the prisoners of war and the situations that they were put in and the hardships of these heroes. And I was startled to discover, and sort of embarrassed to say that I didn't know previously to this, that POWs were in fact abandoned by the government in Vietnam, in other wars as well.
And Rob, most people don't. I don't think most people really realize that. That's
no, they don't. I think there's this culture that was centered around maybe the Rambo movie, where people just think something like that is fiction. And it really is eye-opening. I found there are many great books out there written on the topic, like Kiss the Boys Goodbye, Moscow Bound, An Enormous Crime. And I read a lot of books, and I began to contact various people who were involved close to the issue. People who were involved in the early 1990s in the Senate Select Committee on POW/MI Affairs. And there was this big outpouring of help and support from people who were close to the issue themselves and had been holding the candlelight for this issue for many decades and watched it just slowly disappear from the public platform.
Yeah,
So,
which unfortunately it's done. We're having a conversation with Rob West, author of The Thin Wall.
You know, Rob, I was reading in the foreword, and one of the comments in here was you asked a friend about what you should do or how you should do it, and he said, if you write nonfiction, you can tell the facts. If you write fiction, you can tell the truth.
Mm-hmm.
What is this book? The Thin Line.
This book is inspired from truth. I personally believe, from research that I've done, that servicemen were taken from wars, World War I, Korea, and Vietnam, and they were sent to the Soviet Union. I believe that soldiers in particular were taken from Korea and Vietnam, and they were sent through Czechoslovakia on their way to Moscow, and then ultimately to be sent to various gulags in the Soviet Union. I think that there's a lot of information out there that would support this. My telling it is a fictional account, but I hope that it just sort of sparks dialogue and gets people thinking and asking, did this really happen?
You know, I find it hard to believe. But Marty, you know, he's on the other side of the coin. He believes this totally.
Oh, I don't think there's any question about it. I mean, you know, my story is a little similar to yours, Rob, except I was a little older. But when I got out of the Marines, I remember visiting a friend of mine at UCLA, and the POW movement. At that time, there were still 500 people unaccountable for Korea. And I remember how that affected me. And across the street was a POW office. It was the regional office was across the street from UCLA. And I remember going in there, and next thing I knew, I was volunteering for them because, you know, it was just so obvious that we had abandoned our soldiers in Vietnam. And, you know, Chip, who was a POW special investigator for the government, you know, he said, there's 15,000 people, soldiers that were left in Russia after World War II?
Yeah, so, you know, the numbers vary, I think, depending on who you talk to.
Yes, 15 to 20,000 is what I've heard.
One is one too many. And you even have a situation where Boris Yeltsin basically admitted to milling of records that showed that there were servicemen still in the Soviet Union in the 90s who had been taken from World War II. Many of these men, I believe, were people who were American citizens, possibly first generation, but still had like Ukrainian names, Jewish names, that sort of thing. They sort of felt like they were really Soviet citizens or Eastern Bloc citizens, and apparently felt the need to keep them longer.
Yeah, I mean, can you believe that? You know, we had John Boutier on. We've had him on a couple times, and you know, I think you're the one that gave me John's name in the first place, and he was a congressman at the time, and he still believes that there's live POWs in North Vietnam, which I find kind of hard to believe. But do you think there's still men there alive in Vietnam?
You know, I think it's possible, and I do want to say that John is a real hero. I mean,
yes.
He's one of the few people out there that are keeping this topic in the public spotlight. I do think that it's possible. I'm positive that they were still alive in the 90s. And, you know, it's really just a shame that there was a golden opportunity in the early 90s to actually do something about this. And I fear documents were shredded. I think there was a cover-up starting in the mid-'70s. So I think it's hard to really pinpoint. Is somebody alive today? It's possible, yes.
Yeah.
I do think so, but the records are hard to track.
Yeah. When we come back from the break, let's pick it up there and talk a little bit more about the POW movement. We'll be back in a moment on Taking Care of Business on Current Radio, News Talk 1180.